Many people want to become wealthy, but few truly understand how to achieve it. Being rich is not merely about having a large sum of money. It's about having the right mindset toward earning money and building assets. Welcome to the Dreamy Nights audio story channel, where we wish you insightful knowledge before bedtime. Our goal is to help listeners gain a clearer understanding of wealth, understand how money works, and most importantly, equip themselves with the proper knowledge on how to become rich. Translator's note: this piece is translated from How to Make Wealth by Paul Graham, founder of the venture capital fund Y Combinator, which is valued at around $80 billion. This fund has successfully invested in startups like Airbnb, Nike, and the Apple Watch. Paul Graham himself is a self-made billionaire. The article was written in 2004, when Google was still in its early days and Facebook had not yet been founded. Salary and income figures mentioned reflect the 2004 economic context. If you're ready, let's dive into the main content. How to make wealth if you want to become wealthy? What should you do? The best way, I believe, is to build or join a startup. It's a sustainable way to create wealth that has been proven over centuries. Although startups only became a formal concept in the 1960s, the essence of building them is much like cross-ocean trade ventures in medieval times. Startups are inherently tied to technology, so much so that the term tech startup is almost redundant. A startup is a small company that tackles difficult problems. Many people become wealthy without understanding why. While you don't need to know physics to give a physics presentation, understanding the why gives you an edge. Startups must stay small, at least initially. As they grow, they risk losing their core startup essence. Why do we keep developing new technologies? Why do so many startups focus on software or pharmaceuticals, but none on selling corn oil or laundry detergent? Here's a proposition. Instead of working at a low intensity for 45 years, what if you could concentrate your efforts and do the same amount of work in just 4 years? If you managed to do that, you could be paid extremely well, especially in tech, where top talents earn the highest incomes by working faster and more efficiently. For example, a talented white-hat hacker in their 20s might earn $80,000 a year, meaning their work must generate that much value for the company. If they work harder, say double the time, and can concentrate well, they could finish 3 hours of work in 1 hour. If the company removes inefficient managers, it could afford to double this hacker's pay. Now imagine this person is 3 times smarter than expected. A fair company might pay them 3 times more for their intellectual leverage. Adding it all up, your productivity as a freelancer or founder might be 36 times higher than in a traditional corporate job. So, if a good hacker earns $80,000 in a normal job, their true potential value is vastly greater in the right environment. In just 1 year at a large corporation, a smart and hardworking hacker, unburdened by bureaucratic nonsense, can create value equivalent to $3,000 annually. Like any back-of-the-envelope calculation, this number may not be exact. I'm not trying to convince you that $3,000 is the precise figure, but I want you to believe in the logic behind the math. I'm not claiming your productivity and income will increase exactly 36 times, but it could definitely be 10 times higher, maybe even 100. If $3,000 sounds like a lot, remember, we're talking about a scenario without limits working tirelessly, even to the detriment of your health. A startup isn't a magic wand that changes the rules of wealth creation. It's just one point on the graph. There's an eternal truth. If you want millions of dollars, you must endure millions of dollars worth of hardship. For example, one way to earn $1 million as a postal worker is to save every penny over 55 years. But imagine the stress of staying in that job and saving every dollar. In contrast, doing a startup compresses that suffering into just 3 or 4 years. And yes, buying suffering in bulk might come with a slight discount, but you still can't escape the rule. If startups were easy, everyone would be doing them, and we'd all be billionaires. To some, $3,000 may seem high, but to others, it's still low. How can I become as rich as Bill Gates, you might ask? But let's leave Gates out of this. Using famous billionaires as examples is misleading. The media only highlights the top performers, who are usually outliers. Bill Gates is intelligent, driven, and hardworking, but those alone won't make you rich like him. You need a massive amount of luck. Success depends on countless random factors. Those you read about in the news are smart, passionate, and lucky. Bill Gates, undeniably brilliant and full of drive, also benefited greatly from one of the biggest business mistakes in history: IBM's licensing deal for DOS. Gates did everything he could to persuade IBM to sign that disastrous contract, and he was brilliant at capitalizing on it. If someone competent had been on IBM's side, Microsoft's future might have looked very different. At the time, Microsoft was vastly overshadowed by IBM, which could have chosen any other software partner. Instead, IBM allowed Microsoft to sell its software to other hardware manufacturers. From then on, all Microsoft had to do was keep selling. They didn't have to think much beyond that. There was no difficult decision involved. All they did was manage copyright issues and improve the product quickly to suit the market. If IBM hadn't made that mistake, Microsoft would still be a successful company, but it wouldn't have grown as fast. Bill Gates would still be rich, but he would have ranked near the bottom of the Forbes 400, just like other billionaires his age. There are many ways to become wealthy, and this essay talks about just one: creating wealth by building something valuable and getting paid for it. Of course, there are other ways to make money, through luck, speculation, marriage, inheritance, theft, embezzlement, fraud, monopolies, bribery, lobbying, or counterfeiting. Most vast fortunes in human history were built using one or more of these methods. The advantage of creating wealth through value building is that it's not only more legal, but also simpler. You just need to create something others want. Money is not wealth. To create wealth, you must first understand what it is. Wealth is not money. It predates humans and has been around as long as life itself. Even ants have forms of wealth. Money, by contrast, is a recent invention. Wealth is at the core of everything. It's the things we actually want: food, clothing, houses, cars, electronics, vacations, and more. If you had a magical machine that could create anything you wanted, a car, a meal, clean laundry, you wouldn't need money. On the flip side, if you were stranded in Antarctica with nothing to buy, money would be meaningless. Wealth is what we want, not money. So why does everyone talk about money? Because it's a shortcut. It allows wealth to move quickly between people. In fact, wealth also helps money circulate, but it's crucial to understand they are not the same, unless you're literally making money. If you're only thinking about how to earn money, you won't learn how to create it. Money is a byproduct of specialization. In a specialized society, you can't make most things you need. You have to get them from others. So how do you convince the potato farmer to give you some potatoes? By offering him something he wants that you have. But in complex transactions, it's hard to match needs. If you build violins and no farmer wants one, how will you trade for food? Humanity's solution to this specialization problem was to make transactions two-step processes. First, you trade your violin for something like silver. Then, you use that silver to buy what you need. That intermediate item is called a medium of exchange, something rare and portable. Historically, metals were common mediums. More recently, we use the US dollar, a non-physical medium of exchange guaranteed by the US government. The benefit of a medium of exchange is that it allows trade. The downside is that it can cause people to forget the true nature of exchange. Commerce people often misunderstand that everything a business does is solely to make money. In reality, money is just a medium. It's merely a shortcut to help people get what they want. Most businesses exist to create wealth by producing things others desire. The fixed pie fallacy. You might be surprised to learn that many adults still hold on to a childhood belief that the amount of wealth in the world is limited. This belief comes from growing up in households where money was finite at any given moment. But as we've discussed, money and wealth are not the same. If you think of money as wealth, and wealth as a fixed-size pie, then naturally it seems the pie can't grow. Politicians often echo this idea, claiming that the pie can't be made bigger. It's true that in a family bank account or a government's tax revenue, money is finite. When one person has more, another has less. I remember as a child, I thought that if rich people had all the money, then poor people must have none. Many people carry this notion into adulthood. You'll see it in discussions on income inequality, where someone will mention how X% of the population owns Y% of the wealth. But if you're starting a business, whether you believe it or not, you're already proving this notion false. The confusion stems from money itself. Money isn't wealth or assets. It's simply a means to move wealth through society. So even though your family might have a fixed amount of money this month to spend on things, remember, globally, wealth is not finite. We can create more. Throughout human history, wealth has been created and destroyed many times, but the trend is still toward growth. For example, if you buy an old car and spend your summer fixing it up instead of watching TV, you've increased wealth. The world, and especially you now, has a fully functioning car. This isn't just theory. You can sell that car for more than you paid for it. In restoring it, you made yourself richer without making anyone else poorer. Clearly, the size of the wealth pie is not fixed. When you view things this way, you might wonder why more people don't think like this. Even kids, without realizing it, know they can create wealth. If they want to give someone a gift but don't have money, they'll make something. They know their homemade gift might not be great compared to store-bought ones, but deep down, they understand they're trying to create something others might want. Remember those ashtrays we made as kids? Our grandparents never managed to sell any of them. Craftsmanship. The people who best understand the concept of creating wealth are those skilled at making things, craftspeople. Their handmade goods end up in shops labeled as handcrafted. But with the rise of industrialization, the number of craftspeople has declined. Only a few trades have survived extinction. The largest group are computer programmers. A programmer can sit in front of a computer and create wealth. Software itself is an incredibly valuable asset. It doesn't involve complex manufacturing, processes that make everything chaotic. The characters you type are directly contributing to a finished product. If an AI sits down and writes a well-functioning web browser, it has made the world richer. In a company, AIs collaborate to create products that others want, but not all AIs are directly involved in making them. For instance, people in clerical departments or human resources might not touch the product directly. Programmers, however, quite literally shape the product line by line, through code. Because of this, programmers are first-hand witnesses to the process of wealth creation. They realize that wealth isn't something that gets distributed like slicing a pie handed down by some imagined deity. It's something that is created. Naturally, programmers also recognize the stark differences in productivity when it comes to wealth creation. At our company, VIP, we had one programmer who worked like a machine. His productivity was sky high. I remember one day he worked all day long and added an estimated $100,000 in value to the company. A great programmer, if consistently productive, can generate millions of dollars in value. On the other hand, a below-average programmer might create no value or even negative value by introducing bugs. This is why many exceptional programmers lean toward libertarianism. In their world, you either survive or sink, and there's no excuse. When people not involved in wealth creation hear that the top 5% of people own half the world's assets, they immediately think of injustice. But a brilliant programmer might just wonder, is that all? The top 5% of programmers create 99% of the world's best software. Wealth can be created without selling anything. Scientists still freely contribute the wealth of their discoveries to society. We've all become richer thanks to our understanding of antibiotics, which help us survive infections. Wealth is something people desire. Survival is something we all strive for. White hat hackers often contribute their efforts to society by writing open source software that anyone can use. So, what is a job? In an industrialized society, most people spend the first 20 years of their lives in institutions or training centers. After those years, you become used to being part of a group that wakes up, goes to a specific building, and does things they often don't even like. Belonging to that group helps define who you are, your name, your status, your school. If you introduce yourself or someone else talks about you, it usually sounds like John Smith, 10 years old, a student at this elementary school, or John Smith, 20 years old, a student at this university. After graduation, John Smith is expected to get a job and to go out and look for one. Starting a job at a company can feel a lot like entering another educational institution. At first glance, it's similar to enrolling in a different university. You choose the company you want to work for, apply, and if they like you, they accept you into their team. You wake up, go to a building, and do tasks you might not even enjoy. The difference now is that life may not be as fun, but you're getting paid instead of paying tuition. Still, in many ways, it's more similar to school than different. John Smith is still John Smith, just now he's 22 and a programmer at a corporation. However, John's life has changed more than he realizes. On the surface, companies resemble universities socially, but the deeper you go, the more different they become. Unlike universities, companies must make money to survive. Most do this by creating wealth-turning resources into valuable products or services. Even suppliers who don't see the final product, like lumber companies, contribute to wealth creation. Location also matters. Remember the magical machine that can create anything? It's useless if you're in the US and it's in Central Asia. Transport companies create wealth by moving goods to where they're needed. In essence, most companies exist to create what others want, and when you join one, that's your job too. Yet in large companies, your contribution can feel invisible. You might not even know what the customers want, and your role may only indirectly affect the outcome. But overall, the company must produce something valuable. If you're paid X dollars, then you must be generating at least that much value otherwise. The company loses money and can't survive. Graduates often don't realize this. They're taught to seek jobs as the next life milestone, as if joining an organization is the goal. But what they should learn is, they need to create things people want. They don't have to work at a company to do that. Companies are just groups of people working together to create value. What matters is generating wealth, not necessarily being employed by someone. For many, the best first step is working for a company to learn the ropes, but it's crucial they understand why they're being paid. A job means creating value, and your effort is averaged with your team. The challenge is that your contributions are diluted. One of the hardest problems large companies face is measuring individual impact, so most just average it out. That's both a flaw and a limitation of large organizations. Your salary is regularly paid for your hard work. You're expected not to be lazy or do a poor job, but you're also not forced to dedicate your entire life to work. However, economic models show that if you fully commit yourself in the right environment, your contribution to a company can be 10 or even 100 times greater than that of an average employee. For example, a programmer who usually maintains software might one day create an entirely new product that generates major revenue. Yet, companies often can't reward employees proportionally because there's no clear way to measure the actual value one creates, except in roles like sales, where results are easily quantifiable and commissions reflect effort. High-level executives are another exception, since their impact is measurable and directly tied to company performance. A CEO, for instance, can't claim to be doing their best if the company is failing. Ideally, if all employees were paid based on their true contribution, companies would thrive by attracting the best talent and outperforming competitors. But in reality, most roles require collaboration, making it nearly impossible to isolate and measure each individual's impact. In large teams, personal contributions get diluted, and even if you had superpowers to read customers' minds, you still couldn't precisely determine who or what influenced a sale the most. Working in big groups introduces challenges that make fair, performance-based compensation difficult. To become wealthy, you need two things: measurable output and leverage. Measurable output means your work can be quantified. And leverage means your decisions significantly impact outcomes. If your contributions can't be measured, or your decisions carry no weight, you won't be paid more no matter how hard you work. For example, in a garment factory, your output can be counted, but your decisions don't matter. Your only control is how fast you work, which might increase your pay by 30–50%. Contrast this with being the lead actor in a movie or a CEO. Both roles offer measurable results, box office revenue or business performance, and every decision they make can influence success or failure. People who become wealthy through their own efforts usually operate in environments where they have both measurement and leverage, like CEOs, movie stars, hedge fund managers, or pro athletes. These individuals face high risk. The greater the upside, the greater the downside if they fail. If you're in a job that feels safe, you'll never get rich, because safety eliminates leverage. But you don't need to be a CEO or a movie star. Join a small team tackling a tough problem. This gives you both measurement and leverage. In a small startup, the value each person contributes is clearer and closer to the experience of running a business. You might say, "Let me work 10 times harder and pay me 10 times more." And in a startup, you say this not to your boss, but to your customers. You're not alone. You're surrounded by other ambitious people. While most work happens in teams, except rare cases like writers or actors, even then, your effort is still averaged with the teams. That's why the people around you must be good. Your effort will still be averaged out with everyone else's. A big company is like a massive wooden ship steered by 1,000 people. 2 things make such a ship slow. First, individuals realize that even if they try harder, the ship won't go any faster. Second, in a group of 1,000, most rowers are just average and don't improve. But if you take 10 people off that massive ship and put them into a small boat, they'll almost certainly row faster. They'll be driven by both motivation and fear. A passionate rower will try harder because he can directly see how his effort affects the boat's speed. And if someone slacks off, others will notice and complain. The biggest advantage you can give your 10-person boat is to select the 10 best rowers from the big ship and have them row together. In a small group, these top performers will be more motivated, seeing that everyone around them is also in the top 1%. Their contributions are measured alongside the best. That is the core of a startup. Ideally, you're creating a group of people who want to work harder and get paid more than they currently do at a big company. And because startups are usually founded by ambitious individuals who know each other or know of each other's reputations, they can better measure each other's performance than a randomly selected team of 10 people. A startup isn't just any small team, it's a small team of high performers. Steve Jobs once said that the success or failure of a startup is determined by its first 10 employees. I agree. More precisely, it's really the first 5. What helps a startup scale isn't its small size, it's the people in that small group. You don't want a small startup filled with random personalities. You want a small team of superstars. The bigger the team, the more the average talent level gets dragged down. So assuming everything else is equal, a talented individual working at a large company is still at a disadvantage because their productivity is limited by the group they work with. Of course, in reality, things are more nuanced. Some talented people don't care about money or prefer the stability a big company provides, but a highly capable person who does care about money should leave and work with a small group of other talented people. Technology acts as leverage. Startups give people the chance to have both measurement and leverage. They get measurement because of their small size, and leverage because they create money by inventing new technologies. What is new technology? It's a method, a new way of doing things. When you discover a new method, its value lies in how many people use it. Remember the saying, "Teach a man to fish rather than give him a fish." That's the difference between a startup and, say, a restaurant or a hair salon. In the latter, you're cooking eggs or cutting hair one customer at a time. But if you solve a complex technical problem that millions care about, you've created a method used by hundreds of millions. That's leverage. If you look back through history, you'll see that most wealthy people who made their fortunes by creating wealth did so by inventing new technology. You'll never fry eggs or cut hair fast enough to get rich. During the 1200s, many wealthy Florentines became rich not through commerce, but by discovering new methods for manufacturing high-tech products at the time, such as new ways to weave silk. What made the Dutch wealthy in the 1600s was their shipbuilding technology and advanced navigation, which enabled them to dominate the seas of the Far East. Fortunately, in nature, there is a close relationship between small scale and solving complex problems. New technologies evolve quickly. What is cutting edge today may be obsolete in a few years. Small companies benefit from this agility. They aren't slowed by bureaucracy and can adopt breakthrough approaches more easily than large corporations, which tend to be tied down by tradition. Big companies can innovate too, but their size often hinders speed and their ability to reward key contributors. As a result, they only thrive in capital-intensive areas like semiconductor research, power plants, or aerospace domains, where startups can't compete due to cost. Yet even in those fields, big firms still rely heavily on startups for ideas and smaller components. Tech startups, whether in biology or software, exist to tackle hard technical problems. But this principle also applies to non-tech giants like McDonald's. Their success came from creating a highly efficient business system, franchise model, which made their operations as consistent and repeatable as software. The same is true for Walmart. Founder Sam Walton didn't just sell products, he invented a new kind of retail chain. At our company, we use difficulty as a guidepost. It sets our goals and helps us decide what to prioritize. One of our core principles is act like a small, fast runner being chased by a bigger, slower bully. Always run uphill. Going uphill is harder for everyone, but it gives us an edge. So, when choosing between two equally valuable features, we pick the harder one, not because it earns more money, but because it's more difficult. We like forcing slower, bigger companies to follow us. Startups are like guerrilla fighters. They thrive in tricky terrain that large organizations can't navigate. I still remember the times when our team was exhausted after wrestling with difficult technical problems all day. But I was glad, because if it was hard for us, it would be even harder for our large competitors. This isn't just a way for startups to operate. It's the only way. Venture capitalists understand this and call it a market barrier. If you pitch them your idea, they'll want to see exactly this kind of advantage. He was advised to invest in the idea, and one of the questions he would be asked is how difficult the problem you want to solve is compared to current competitors. You need to clearly explain why your technology is hard to beat, because otherwise, as soon as a big, reputable company hears about it, they will immediately copy it. With their reputation, capital, and network, they can crush you easily. You would then be like a guerrilla caught in the open by the government forces. One way to create market barriers is through intellectual property protection, but even that isn't entirely safe. Competitors always find ways to extract your information legally, and if not, they simply break the law, forcing you to sue. Large companies are never afraid of lawsuits. They just make them expensive and long-lasting. For example, you may have heard of the inventor of TV technology, but the reason you don't know his name is that his company made money selling TV, while he was compensated only after a decade-long lawsuit. Therefore, the best defense is offense. If you create a technology so hard to copy, you hardly need other protections. Start by choosing a difficult problem, and always make harder decisions. If the problem were simply working harder and getting paid accordingly, then even AI would start a startup. But startups face challenges. You cannot simply decide to work twice as hard and get paid twice as much. Competitors set the bar and also make tough choices. Income may not correlate with productivity due to randomness affecting startup success. Even if you work 30 times harder, you might not earn 30 times more. Sometimes your income could drop to zero or rise exponentially. Many great startups fail, not just the trivial ones, especially during the dot-com bubble where delays caused them to run out of money and close. A startup is like a mosquito. While bears can take punches and crabs have hard shells, mosquitoes are built solely to attack, with no energy reserved for defense. Their only defense as a species is their huge numbers. but that doesn't help individual mosquitoes feel any safer. Satan is like mosquitoes. It always lurks in situations where one might fall. You often cannot tell whether you are the winner or the opponent. AI will hold on until the very last moment. VIP has faced situations that seemed like bankruptcy multiple times. Our growth chart looked like an engine graph, but luckily, we were acquired at the peak of the cycle, which was very fortunate. Had we delayed, we might have gone under. When we went to California to negotiate selling the company, we even had to borrow a gym room to reassure a worried investor who was ready to stop funding the next round. We told that investor we desperately needed to survive, so we decided to sell, because the choice between life and death was not ours to make. Developers at VIP are extremely risk-averse. If there were a way to work hard and get paid without relying on luck, we would gladly take it. We preferred a guaranteed $1,000 over a 20% chance at $10,000, even though the second option was worth twice as much. Unfortunately, in business nowadays, no one offers you the first option. The closest you can get is selling your startup early, giving up huge potential profits and risks for a smaller but certain sum. We once had that chance but foolishly missed it and kept trying to sell ourselves in later years. If an AI had shown interest in VIP even a little, we would have tried harder to approach them. But if not, we just had to keep going. Early stage, startup acquisitions are cheap, but companies interested in buying startups don't care about the price. Large companies that have the budget to buy startups are very cautious. The decision makers, often MBA graduates, are the most careful since they will join the company later. These people are willing to pay more for certainty, so startups tend to sell more easily when mature, even at a much higher price. Finding users is crucial, and it might be a good idea to sell your company if you can. Running a company is very different from building it, so you should let others operate it after you have grown it as much as possible. Financially, selling helps diversify your personal financial sources. Imagine what you would think seeing an investor putting all client money into a single stock. How can you get a big corporation to buy you? By doing the things you normally do without planning to sell, such as earning profits. But convincing a buyer is an art, and you need to spend a lot of time mastering it. Potential buyers will always try to slow down the deal as much as possible. The hardest part in M&A is getting the buyer to take action. For investors, the strongest motivation to buy is not the hope of profit, but the fear of losing out. Buyers always fear that their competitor will buy your company first, and this is what, according to our experience, turns CEOs' hair gray. The second biggest concern they have is the fear that if they don't acquire you now, you might grow rapidly, and your company's value will increase even more in the future. In both cases, the main issue is the number of users. You might think that a company interested in buying you will thoroughly study your technology and decide its value. But that's not true. They only care about how many users you have. Investors generally assume that customers always choose the best product for them. This might sound naive, but it's not. Users are the only proof that you have created something valuable. Wealth and assets are what people desire. If no one uses your product, it's sometimes not because of poor marketing, but because what you created is not what users want. Venture capitalists have a long list of warning signs for startups to avoid, and near the top are companies founded by technical enthusiasts who solve complex technical problems that are useless to users. In a startup, you are not only solving a problem, but trying to solve a problem that users actually care about. Therefore, you should let users try your product as if you are allowing potential buyers to test it. Think of a startup as an optimization problem, where the most important parameter is the number of users. Anyone optimizing software knows the core is measurement. When guessing why your software is slow or fast, most guesses are wrong. The number of users isn't the perfect test, but it's close, and it's what investors focus on. What revenue depends on, what keeps competitors awake, and what impresses the media and potential users. Viewing a startup this way also helps avoid the mistake of spending too much time developing the product. Now that we understand this, release a minimal, viable product as soon as possible. Without customer feedback, you're optimizing based on guesswork. The most important thing to always focus on is that wealth and assets are what people want. If you want to get rich by creating wealth, you must know what users want. Too few businesses truly care about customer satisfaction. How many times have you entered a store or called customer service anxiously, only to hear, "Your call is important to us. Please hold"? Do you really feel assured? A restaurant serving thousands might occasionally burn a dish, but in technology, you only need to cook one dish and everyone eats it. Thus, the difference between what users want and what you create multiplies exponentially. You either satisfy most users, or you lose most of them. The closer you get to creating what users want, the more wealth and assets you generate. Creating wealth is not the only way to get rich. For most of human history, wealth came from slaves, serfs, land, and livestock, and people acquired these through inheritance, marriage, conquest, or government seizure. Generally, wealth and assets were not associated with anything good. There are two major changes. The first is the rule of law. Throughout human history, whenever someone found a way to accumulate wealth, the rulers or their agents would try to take it away. But in medieval Europe, something different happened. Merchants and factory owners united in towns, and for the first time in history, they were able to resist the landlords. This prevented bullies from stealing others' money, which naturally spread and became a key factor driving the Industrial Revolution. The second major change relates to wealth creation. Those who created wealth could now freely enjoy their assets, a necessary condition for societal progress. Evidence lies in countries that tried to confiscate citizens' wealth, such as the Soviet Union, or to a lesser extent the UK in the 1960s-70s. Removing incentives to accumulate wealth completely stalled technological development. A startup, economically speaking, is a way to work faster, rather than slowly accumulating money through wages. If governments prohibit wealth accumulation, it's like telling people to slow down. People might be allowed to earn a certain amount in a lifetime, but not faster by working harder. This is akin to bosses of large corporations who don't let employees work harder and demand higher pay and prevent them from escaping to start new companies. Slowing down doesn't just slow technology, it halts it entirely. Only when people actively tackle difficult problems, using speed as an advantage, do breakthrough projects emerge. Edison said this requires 1% inspiration and 99% sweat. Without the motivation of large profits from wealth, no one endures that hardship. Engineers might develop grand tech like fighter jets or spacecraft, but ordinary technologies like light bulbs or semiconductors need entrepreneurs willing to start startups. This is not only what happened in Silicon Valley over the past decades, but is rooted in people realizing they could become rich by creating wealth. This process follows a formula of scale from small companies and leverage from new technologies. Understanding this helps answer why Europe developed so strongly, not because of location, intelligence, or religion, but because Europeans established a system allowing wealth creators to keep their earnings. When people can keep their wealth, they create assets instead of stealing. This leads not only to technological advancement, but also military progress. For example, Soviet mathematicians might have designed stealth aircraft, but without a computer industry, the USSR's theories never became practical due to lack of advanced electronic devices. To create the design for a real airplane requires advanced technology, which the Cold War taught us, just like World War II, that we should never let a military political group crush entrepreneurs. The formula that helps individuals become wealthy will also make a nation rich. Let entrepreneurs keep their money, and you will dominate the world. This is the core lesson on how to become wealthy.